This is Grandmaster Boris Alterman and you're watching Gambit Guide. Second part of the Blumenfeld Gambit. So after d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, c5 and d5. So we are studying last time the outcome of b5 gambit line, which we call the Blumenfeld Gambit, according to the Benjamin Blumenfeld, quite famous Russian master. So last time we also considered that allowing black his main idea after d takes e6, f takes e6, c takes b5 and d5 is not always so great idea to play this position with white, because black is getting just very serious control over the center squares. He has quite easy development of all his pieces, so the bishop goes to b7 to d6. After short casting, black is just also having quite serious pressure over the f file. So knight from b8 goes to d7, so black brings just all his pieces into the game. And last time we were studying the classical game of Tarrasch against Alohin, who was a master of playing games with the Blumenfeld Gambit. Later on, white discovered just better opportunity in this position, and one of these opportunities is bishop g5, when white is trying to fight back against the black's control over the center. So with this developing move, white is not just pinning this knight on f6, but of course intending to bring his center pawn from e2 to e4, taking the space advantage. So this bishop g5 move become just very, I would say, popular for many years, and for black it's not always so easy to find the best continuation. However, if white is going to play here some bad move and some mistakes, the game could finish very fast, like it happened in one of the tournaments in 2002, the Najdorf Memorial. And when after e takes d5, instead of standard move c takes d5, white decided to play bishop takes f6, queen takes f6 and queen takes d5, intending the rook on a8. Unfortunately, this is leading to the losing position for white after queen takes b2 and queen takes a8. Suddenly black is coming with a simple checkmate threat, queen c1, so just made after 8 moves. So other trap in such situation could be after h6, when after bishop takes f6 and queen takes f6, black is not going to wait here, but immediately attacks, of course, the b2 pawn. And here the theoretical move is queen c2, which leads to slightly better position for white. However, a move like knight c3 could be easily disposed by b4, and after knight b5, queen takes b2, or immediately black can play king d8, and some variations intending a6. So we also can realize that bishop g5 after b takes c4, e4, queen a5 check, white almost forced to play bishop d2, since knight c3 easily could be met by knight takes e4 and black is getting material advantage. Still, after bishop d2, the position is quite complicated. Queen b6, knight c3, bishop a6. So this is more or less, I would say, similar to the Banco Gambit ideas. Indeed, instead of moving black's dark square bishop to g7, so fianchetting this bishop to g7, so black has e6 already fighting, challenging the white center. So later on we will see that in this critical position after bishop g5, one of the best continuations played by Romanian, one of the top grandmaster, Dieter Liviu Nisipeanu, is e takes d5 move, which even today considered as the best. However, Black has just more opportunities to complicate things. For instance, Queen a5 check. Quite easy for white to go wrong, since Bishop d2 could be met by Queen b6, and for white it's extremely difficult to keep the center. Let's say d takes e6, f takes e6, c takes b5. So black immediately could play d5, but also could use the Benko ideas after a6, and one of the games played in 2004 between Nohol and Samody continue. B takes a6, bishop takes a6, queen c2, bishop e7. So black is having quite nice development of all his pieces. The knight is going to be posed to c6 and then maybe to d4 or to b4. It's not so easy for white to develop his king side, since bishop on a6 is just very powerful. After e3, bishop takes f1. Black is forcing white to lose his castling rights. King takes f1 and short castling, having the full compensation for the sacrificed pawn. Black is not only having the strong center and semi-open f-file, but as well we have just great opportunity to attack white's pawns on the queen side. Look at the good position of rook on a8 and queen on b6, so all black pieces almost, except the knight on b8, already in the game. So knight c6 is coming, so black's position just very good. And after white made just wrong move g3, this game finished almost immediately. Queen b7, aiming the knight on f3, and after king g2, knight e4. There is no way to stop rook takes f3 or knight takes f2 with a decisive material advantage for black. Same, black is intending knight g5. So after rook f1, already any move here wins. Also knight g5, also rook takes f3, which happened in the game. And after king takes f3 and knight takes d2, white resigned very soon, since he's going to lose almost all his pieces. After king did king e2 and knight takes f1 and queen h1 check. Definitely, if we look at the starting point of the queen a5 move, that we have to consider very seriously, the most ambitious alternative for white is knight c3. So after knight c3, so black is almost forced to continue knight e4, since all other alternatives just very dangerous. For instance, after b4, bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and knight e4, white is getting just serious development advantage. And a move like b3 check after knight c3, b takes a2, rook takes a2, queen b4, and e4 leads to the clear superiority for white. So white is just still keeping the strong center, and black's bishops are quite passive in this position. So that's why knight e4 more or less a forced move in such a situation. Definitely white could play for slightly better position after bishop d2. Indeed, after knight takes d2, knight takes d2 and b4, the situation is a bit different, since knight e4, f5, knight g3 and g6, black is fighting back for the center squares, intending to develop the bishop to the long diagonal. So white's pawn center is not so strong as the previous line, and black is still having quite good alternatives. So that's why the most ambitious, I would say, and most logical continuation in this position is c takes b5. Only by playing c takes b5, white could really pretend on any advantage. So white is in this situation having the development advantage, and by the sacrificing the pawns, trying to start the direct attack against black's king, which is still stuck in the center. So after knight take g5 or after bishop b7, always black is having trouble. Let's say the game between Michael Royce and Maciej Suarez from the Pardubice Open Tournament 2003. Continuing here, bishop b7, bishop d2, so force black to exchange his active knight on e4, which just allows white to take the full control over the center. Now if knight takes d2, knight takes d2, and bishop takes d5, white is just simply playing e4. Next, knight is coming to c4 or to b3, and definitely we have the position when white is clearly better. After black played knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, and queen takes b5, e4, queen b6, and bishop c4. So here we have just typical transposition into the situation when white finished all his pieces development, making castle and still controlling the center with a great post bishop on c4 and c3. So that's why queen a5 move today lost its popularity, and according to today's theory we say almost necessary for black to play e takes d5. So look at that once again. c5, d5, b5, and bishop g5. So one of the classical games from the white side, played in 1985 between Alexander Chinin and Anthony Miles, continued here, h6, but after bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and queen c2, e takes d5, c takes d5, d6, and e4. So black's pawn on b5 is under attack. After a6, a4, b4, and knight bd2, so white is just moving his knight to the strong four-person c4, then the other knight from f3 could go to d2, bishop could be developed to d3, and after short castling and f4 and e5, just black is under smashing attack. His bishops are quite passive in this situation. When Anthony Miles tried here to exchange one of his bishops after bishop g4, which from the first sign looks like a very logical move, it was met by strong reaction. e4, e5, so white is immediately fighting in the center, so trying to create the strong threats. Take on e5, knight goes to e4, queen f4, and now knight f to d2. So white's having just very great initiative. The pawn on c5 is under threat. After bishop f5 and bishop d3, white got just significant positional advantage. Bishop takes e4, knight takes e4, knight bd7, g3, queen g4, h3. So now if black is moving his queen to f3, then after castling short side it's just very difficult to save it, because white is intending bishop e2, and in many lines the queen is just trapped. Let's say after bishop e7, bishop e2, queen f5, and knight d6, the queen is gone. Otherwise, after Miles plays this position, queen h5, Chernin just moved his pawn forward, using the same ideas that best pawn should be pushed. Queen g6, rook d1, and still black's position is very, very difficult. So white is intending at right moment to capture on c5. Black bishop on f8 is stuck. It's incredibly difficult for black to complete his development when white's bishop always could be moved to the strong diagonal a2 g8. So Chernin just completely destroyed Miles' position of Anthony Miles just after 32 moves. So since then, h6 and queen a5, as we can see, just cannot be recommended. And so now we came to conclusion that in the Blumenfeld Gambit, you have to be very, very careful. And the strongest reaction after bishop g5 could be only e takes d5. And from here we move to the game between Vasily Ivanchuk and Liviu Nisipeanu, played in World Cup Hanty-Mansiysk 2007. So let's just be more familiar with the black's main ideas in the Blumenfeld Gambit. And you can see and understand that if Liviu Nisipeanu is playing this opening against Vasily Ivanchuk, it should be playable even on your level. d4, knight f6, knight f3. So this time we can see that Blumenfeld Gambit could be reached even from the completely different moves order. c5, d5, e6, and now white is trying to get into the Benoni defense when Nisipeanu plays b5. So now we can understand that Blumenfeld Gambit is quite serious weapon in the editor's open repertoire. Bishop g5, e takes d5. So at the start of the lesson I showed you that bishop takes f6 in this situation is a very dangerous move. That way, more or less, white is forced to capture immediately with the pawn to play c takes d5. And here, instead of playing h6, which after bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and queen c2 leads to the game which we just looked at, Chernin against Miles, Nisipeanu started to use d6 move, which just becomes very popular. e4. So white is taking opportunities, and the bishop on g5, spinning knight on f6, and just black cannot touch the pawn on e4. At the same time, the pawn on b5 is under threat. Indeed, now black is having two pawns on c5 and b5, and just good opportunity for black also to develop some counterplay on the queen side. a6, knight bd2. So definitely white is not going to develop his knight to c3, because in that case black would play dynamic b5, b4 like in the knight. So knight on d2 plays slightly, I would say, less active than on c3. Indeed, white is just continue protecting his center, and with the next idea bishop d3 and short castling, we are intending at the right moment even to attack black's center after a4, when by b4 white knight from d2 would get just clear good alternative for his d2 square on c4, which is just very good outpost for the knight, of course. And here I would say Nisipeanu find just quite serious improvement in the black's position for black here. He played bishop to e7. So if white is going to play here some move like bishop d3, suddenly we are getting into trouble, since black has typical combination. So can you find it? So the main point here is that white bishop on g5 is hanging in many lines, and that is the reason that tactically this bishop on g5 could be serious target for black pieces. We play knight f6 takes d5, and wow, white is losing a pawn for nothing. Look at that. If white is captured on e7, so we can capture also with the knight, also with the queen, since white's king is still in the center. And in case of e takes d5 and bishop takes g5, so black is also having pawn up without any clear compensation. So this bishop e7 idea just changed, I would say, the face of all this variation and all this Blumenfeld Gambit, and that's why today I would say few top players even included this Blumenfeld Gambit into their opening repertoire. Why so many 25, 26 players is trying to unbalance the position already in the opening using this aggressive opening. So instead of bishop d3, Ivanchuk already had to be very careful, and he moved away his bishop after bishop f4. Because it's definitely clear that a move like bishop takes f6 only allows black to get the initiative by bishop takes f6, queen c2, knight d7, and all black's pieces are just fantastically placed. Black is controlling the e5 square. As I explained before, his c5 and b5 pawn just seriously could damage white's pawn structure on the queen side later on. And it's not so dangerous for black if white is trying to attack the pawn on b5, because after a4 we always could play rook b8, protecting the pawn on b5. So black is just very good in this position. Ivanchuk moved away his bishop and played bishop f4. However, black didn't find any trouble after short castling. a4. So now, just important not to move the pawn to b4, because after b4 and bishop d3, white is just really creating the classical setup with a knight on c4 and getting slightly better position. So black has just to open up a game after b takes a4, intending to move his bishop to b5 later on, or to create the pressure over the white, over the b file, and to attack the white's pawn on b2. For instance, after rook takes a4, bishop d7, rook a2, a5, so knight is coming to a6. Later on the knight is going to b4, or black could continue attacking white's pawn structure on the queen side. I mean pawn on b2 after queen maybe b6 or queen b8. It's quite difficult for white to push the center pawn, because after e4, e5 always the pawn on d5 is hanging. Instead of capture on a4, Ivanchuk decided to play bishop d3, bishop d7, so Isipiano is not going to sacrifice now the pawn on a4 too fast, so he's intending bishop b5, standard move. Short castling, bishop b5, queen e2, and typical move knight bd7. So for black is very important to complete development of all his pieces. So black is ready to sacrifice on b5. Indeed, after bishop takes b5, a takes b5, and queen takes b5, so black at least could play rook b8, but I guess that main intention was of course just to play something like queen b8, and or white has to trade the queens. In that case, the pawn on b2 is quite weak, so black is organizing the typical, I would say, Benko Gambit pressure over the white's queen side. So Ivanchuk has no choice but to capture, and he just intended that after queen b8 maybe to capture and to move his rook to a2. So that's why Isipiano choosing this position just to simplify the game. After rook b8, intending rook takes b2, queen d3, rook b4, knight c4, and trade knights after knight b6, knight fd2, queen c7, and black is just ready to move the knight from f6 to d7. Maybe this rook from f8 goes to b8. So black is almost equalizing here in such a situation. So it was quite difficult for white to play here for any serious advantage. So but let's look this recommendation that after queen takes b5 to play queen b8. So maybe it was just even more interesting solution for black instead of playing rook b8. Here, in case white is moving away his queen, let's say to b3, to d3, so black maybe cannot capture immediately on b2 because after rook f to b1 somehow queen is trapped. However, I believe that that black still could continue like queen b4 or even moving the knight to h5 and later on to bring the bishop to f6 at some lines. So the position is just fairly equal in many variations. White is not getting any serious advantage. So we can understand that naturally the Blumenfeld Gambit is quite very similar to the ideas which we studied in the Bangkok Gambit. So I recommend you, if you would like just to include this opening into your repertoire, just also to repeat the lessons of the Gambit guide about the Bangkok Gambit, just to know much better the ideas of how to develop your pressure on the queen side. So in that game, Ivanchuk didn't succeed to win this game, so game is finished in draw after the long fight when the chances were approximately equal, because as you can understand, white got almost no advantage out of the opening. So with this game I would like just to finish my 2-lesson course about the Blumenfeld Gambit. We covered many variations and I just overviewed the latest theoretical battles in these critical positions, and I could tell you that many top players, many grandmasters just included this very aggressive opening into their repertoire, and like we saw now, the ideas from Nisipano, e takes d5, d6 and bishop e7, just a quite serious attempt to equalize also immediately almost in the opening. If you have any question about the Blumenfeld Gambit, you can leave me a message on ICC and just follow the Gambit guide on Chess FM. See you.